That's it. It's not going to cost your animal if you don't adjust your parallax adjustment.
I don't know if I'm comfortable with that statement. I think the big takeaway here is if there's lead in the air, there's hope in the heart.
Now that's the one I'm not comfortable with. You've all heard about parallax, right? It's the thing in your scope where the image and the crosshair are not in focus on the same plane, right? A lot of scopes have a parallax adjustment knob on them. Some don't. The ones that don't have a set parallax distance. Rimfire is usually set around 25 yards. High-powered rifle scopes are going to be set at 150 yards, and in some rare instances, long-range high-powered scopes will be set at 200-300 yards and out. Most of the scopes we're using these days for Western hunting will have a parallax adjustment. I got half of the MeatEater crew here with me today. Got Cal, Garrett Long, Spencer Newharth, Corey Calkins, and we're gonna test on whether parallax adjustment is going to affect our group size at 200 yards. So we're gonna shoot a group with the parallax set at the lowest setting, and then we're gonna shoot a group at adjusting the parallax so that it's in focus at 200 yards. To make it so that we don't get too comfortable on the gun and are able to repeat it and make our group tight, we're gonna change positions between shots and then see if with our parallax adjusted properly, if that's going to change the group size versus the parallax adjusted not in focus. Do you think that the adjusting the parallax is going to change your group size at 200 yards?
200 yards seems tight. I'm going to say minimally.
Minimally.
Yeah. Like it's not going to matter for killing an animal.
Well, I think it's going to be minimal, but we got to keep in mind that it's also can be extrapolated further out. So if, let's say you shoot a 2-inch bigger group with your parallax out of adjustment, that means at 400 yards you're going to shoot a 4-inch bigger group. At 500 yards it'd be a 5-inch bigger group, right? So it might seem tight at this range and minimal, you'd definitely be able to kill something, but I think it's going to matter when we're talking about longer shots.
One thing to keep in mind to make sure that adjusting parallax actually changes something is that first of all that your reticle is in focus, and that's done by adjusting the diopter, which is the ring that's closest to your eye. To do that very quickly, you just want to look through the scope quickly and adjust that ring until the reticle comes into focus, okay? Don't spend too long of a time looking through it because your eye will actually adjust to the out of focus reticle and make it in focus. So look up quickly at like a clear blue sky or a plain white wall and make sure right when you look at it, the reticle is in focus. Once you've done that, then you can mess around with the parallax.
I'm gonna move to the bench. With this Tacticam, I can barely see this thing. It's hard to see that. I think that lowest setting though, if you're just like looking through your scope to see if it was like clear or not, and you're like, oh, it's clear, you're probably like looking at 75 yards. So I actually think that's super practical to get out in the field and looks fuzzy, maybe you don't really care, but that's like hard shooting. Who's next? Nice little 5.5-inch group you got there, Janis.
As expected.
All right, here we go.
Exactly. So.
The lighting might be different.
Spencer, that is some really good shooting. I
Garrett.
just not lying.
Coming from you.
All right, there was 30 rounds at 200 yards with Parallax not in focus. Now we're gonna do the same thing with the Parallax in focus.
It did tighten up a little bit.
I'll frame this, I think.
Want me to sign it for you?
I saw a Sharpie.
He should sign something for you.
We're gonna measure outside to outside.
Yeah, outside to outside. 0.2807.
First round, average group size between all of us, 3.508 inches. Second round, 3.05 inches. So almost exactly half an inch difference between having the Parallax set at being out of focus, which we all set at the lowest setting, which is roughly 50 yards, versus setting it in focus, which meant roughly 200 yards.
And the big question, right, is like, does this half inch at 200 become an inch at 300, 2 inches at 400 or
Right.
greater, right?
I would imagine so.
It does.
But for my ranges for what I'm going to shoot animals at, 500 to 600 yards max in perfect conditions, I still don't think I'm going to miss the vitals. Maybe the vitals of a squirrel, but not the vitals of an elk.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're half an inch off at 200, that'd mean you're a quarter minute. So you would be 1 inch off at 4.
I think the bigger, like more noticeable thing was target acquisition.
Yeah.
You know, it takes a lot longer when you're out of focus, and those are precious seconds when you're in the field. So we didn't measure that today, but that felt meaningful.
Yeah, it didn't feel comfortable for me to be shooting at that target when it was out of focus.
No.
I didn't like it.
I find I end up shooting a lot of deer sub 200 yards,
Yeah.
but over 150. So I'm probably gonna just leave it at 200.
I think we can't overlook too that one of the results that skewed this a little bit was Spencer shooting. Now keep in mind, before like people will get all excited about group sizes, right, and what inch gun you have, we were shooting 6-shot groups, which most people judge it off of 3-shot groups, or a lot of hunters do, and most people do middle to middle for measurement. We were doing outside to outside, so we're gaining a little bit there. But his first group, he shot 1.6,
Which was the out of focus.
which was the out of focus. And I feel like you should frame this because it was like all right in around the bullseye too. 1.6 out of Parallax, outside to outside. So really, like most people would call it a 1.5 inch group. With 6 shots is like, we knew you going into your next round, you couldn't beat that group.
Right. That one, the first one, that was closer to when I had coffee this morning. The second one was further away from when I had coffee this morning.
So maybe that's the next experiment. I mean, I feel like based off of my hypothesis, it did not affect it as much as I thought it would. And I thought it was going to really change things up. And we tried to manipulate positions to where one shot you're laying down right behind the gun, and the next, the way that bench was set up, you were really like kind of torqued off to the right and kind of peering through the optic. So it should have really shifted things around, and it did not affect it the way I thought it would.
Yeah, there's 1,000 factors that go into killing an animal. This is like that much of the piece of the pie.
For the in the field application, leave your parallax in that average shooting zone.
Sure.
Yep.
And if you have time, if your deer looks out of focus, then turn it, make it be in focus. But it's not going to cost you the animal if you didn't focus it. The big takeaway here is shoot more. It's going to give you more confidence. You're going to know what your gun's going to do and what your sight picture is going to look like downrange, and you're going to know that if your parallax is out of focus, it ain't going to cost you that deer. It's going to be something else in your shooting game.